Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching this special telecast with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. On this day in 1975, that is 45 years ago, former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi imposed the emergency, which was followed by the black chapters of India's history. It was during this time several people had literally lost their independence. And also, this is considered to be one of the darkest moments in India's history. Though the emergency was imposed on the intervening night of June 25th and 26th, the foundation for it was laid on June 12th, 1975 itself. To talk about India's darkest days, I have with me on the program the Vice Chairman and Executive Council, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, and also author of The Emergency, Indian Democracy's Darkest Hour, and former Chairman, Prasar Bharati, Mr. A. Surya Prakash. Sir, welcome to Rajya Sabha Television.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And so as far as the emergency is concerned, it was the movement against it was led by none other than Mr. J.P. Narayan, and we all know, of course, his role and what he has done. But who were some of the other leaders of that time, and who were those who spent time in jail?
You see, what happened was in the build-up to the imposition of emergency, the critical turning point, as it were, was the judgment of the Allahabad High Court, saying that unseating Indira Gandhi in an election petition. That happened on June 12. From then, the campaign started within Congress party that come what may, she should not resign as Prime Minister. And it all led up to her decision on 25th of June to impose an emergency using the provisions of Article 352 of the Constitution. Of course, J.P. Narayan was leading a movement at that time against corruption and so on and so forth. And that night, once they took the decision, Jayaprakash Narayan was arrested, and with him were an array of political leaders of the country: Morarji Desai, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, L.K. Advani ji, Madhu Dandavate, George Fernandez, Chandrasekhar, a lot of them. And also hundreds of other political workers. They were all detained, put under MISA. In fact, in the present establishment in India, there are a lot of people who were also very important soldiers in that campaign for restoration of democracy in the country. Our Vice President, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, he was arrested and he was in jail for 17 months. Then Arun Jaitley, he was another man who went to jail and was there, I think, for 19 months. Among the present ministers in the government, Ravi Shankar Prasad, Ram Vilas Paswan, Prakash Javadekar, these are all people who have suffered jail terms at that time, defending India's or demanding the restoration of democracy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi went underground, so also many other leaders of the RSS at that time. Dattatreya Hosbale was in jail, Narendra Modi ji was underground, and he and many others were active in helping the families of those who had been jailed by the Indira Gandhi government. Now, apart from this, I must tell you that a lot of people have made great sacrifices. This list, which I am giving, is just a representative list. Among MISA detainees, and at that time, a total of 110,000 people were put in jail by the Indira Gandhi regime. And a lot of among political persons, I think the biggest share went to the RSS. Out of, that was in 1977, out of 16,345 political persons who were put in jail under MISA at that time, the RSS had 3,254 in jail. The CPI-ML had 766. Then you had the Jan Sangh, 772. Then CPM, 81. then the Samajwadi Party and its variants, 225. These are all people who were fighting for restoration of democratic values in the country and for restoration of the constitution. Actually, we lost the core values in our constitution at that time. And this was the kind of sacrifice that organizations like RSS and many others did. And finally, their efforts succeeded in that in 1977 March, we were able to get back our democracy and our constitution.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Surya Prakash, someone who has gone through the emergency, someone who has seen this in close quarters, and someone who's spoken about how these people, went through so many sacrifices and put through so much on the line. What is it, if you can give us a sense of, the kind of atrocities that were committed 45 years ago, and you can, give us a sense of what exactly was happening to the common man as well.
You see, what happened was, we have discussed this earlier, the habeas corpus case and all that. The core of the disturbance was what happened to the constitution. That is, we lost our fundamental rights virtually, and the Supreme Court was told, and Supreme Court agreed with the government's view that citizens cannot enforce their fundamental rights like equality before law and the equal protection of laws and right to life and personal liberty, Article 21. These are all, provisions which citizens cannot assert, during the emergency, so long as the presidential proclamation is there. That was the judgment of Supreme Court in that case. As a result, what happened was, once you lose your fundamental rights, then anything is possible. So across the board, across sectors, there was a kind of police raj happening, and people in government went virtually berserk at that time. For example, V.C. Shukla was the INB minister, and one day he called his officers and said, come on, get people from the Bombay film industry to promote the 20-point program of Indira Gandhi. So they said, someone said, yes, we must get Kishore Kumar to sing. Kishore Kumar did not want to sing in praise of Indira Gandhi or the emergency. So when he resisted, the first thing they did was to ban Kishore Kumar songs being broadcast by All India Radio and Doordarshan, and they, started a campaign against him. And finally, Kishore Kumar had to give in and say, okay, I will cooperate with the government. And V.C. Shukla said that, we have taken Kishore Kumar as an example, and we are dealing with him in a very stern way, so that this message goes across to the film industry that we want all of them to cooperate and do what we want. So that was one example. Then, since he was the Minister for Information Broadcasting, he also, in February, he just called his officers and said, the Congress manifesto has to be translated into many languages. So organize it immediately. So they pulled out 22 translators from All India Radio, DAVP and so on, took them to this Vishwa Yuvak Kendra in Chanikyapuri, put them in a room, locked them up and gave them, it was like an exam paper. They gave them some 16 or 18 page document, which was the Congress manifesto written in English, asked them to translate it. And in those days, there was no cell phone, this, that and the other. This whole operation went on till late night, and they were not to contact anybody or tell anybody. Virtually locked up and forcefully made to do things like this. So then a few days later, he wanted all the designers and others in the government. He called them to his house and said, now you design the Congress party's posters. So this was just going on endlessly in various fields, and whether it was the Home Ministry, whether it was defense or whatever it is, in every ministry, you could see ministers just crossing the line, as it were, and threatening people and getting things done. There was also a cabal around Sanjay Gandhi, and they threatened very senior bureaucrats, district magistrates were threatened and asked to sign orders of police firing long after the firing had taken place. I mean, it's a very long story and a sad story of what happened when we lost our democracy and our constitution.
Absolutely. Talking about Sanjay Gandhi now, let's talk about the whole issue of family planning and a lot of
Yeah.
coercion and what really went into it and how that too was a major problem as far as the citizen of the country were concerned.
Yeah, in case of family planning, what happened? Sanjay Gandhi felt that we had to take some strong coercive measures to bring down the population. So the message went across. That was a time of largely one-party rule. There were just a couple of states where you had other parties in power. It was basically the Congress. So all the chief ministers were summoned. All of them were given quotas. You see, what happens when you give a quota to a chief minister is he passes it on to the chief secretary, to the IG of police, and so on and so forth. Finally, it comes down to the constable. Every school teacher, constable, they had quota of some 10 people to be brought to sterilization camps. And as a result, policemen would roam around in jeeps, go to the bazaar, this, that, and just gather men of different age groups. You see, just bundle them into a jeep and take them to a primary health center for vasectomy operations. This went on in a ruthless manner. And the other thing that happened was, a lot of chief ministers wanted to show their loyalty to Indira Gandhi and Sanjay Gandhi. And, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, he had fixed quotas, you see, for different states. For example, in Uttar Pradesh was given a quota of 4 lakh sterilization operations that year. The chief minister revised it to 15 lakhs and informed Indira Gandhi, Madam, I have increased the quota to 15 lakhs. And down the line, this quota thing was in operation. It led to a lot of problems within the state because from school teachers to police constables to PWD staff, everybody was chasing people to catch them and take them to family planning centers for these surgeries. And there were a lot of atrocities committed. For example, in Azamgarh, there were 2 teachers. Both of them happened to be Muslims. And they said that they cannot undergo vasectomy because of religious reasons. So straight away the district magistrate said, lock them in. So they were put in under MISA. After some days they were weeping and crying and saying, what do we do now? We can't stay in jail. So they said, it's very simple, just go to a family planning center, get your vasectomy done and come with the certificate. So these guys agreed to that. They got their operations done, got the certificate. The district magistrate saw that, and I think after 10 days, he withdrew the MISA detention order and released them. Can you imagine? I'm giving you this example because it gives you an idea what happens when democracy derails. You see, so long as we are a democratic nation, we don't realize what can happen if it goes off the track. Uttaur village in Haryana was another case where largely Muslim populated, and they said this village, the Muslim community is resisting family planning. So Bansilal said, just surround the village and sort this problem out. So they sent a police battalion, surrounded the village early morning. All males from 8 to 80 were bundled into police vans, taken to a primary health center in Noo, and vasectomy operations were done. In the night, they were dumped back. So, this is the things we have seen, in these World War II movies of Nazis, what they were doing in the Hitler era. This is a repeat of that, what happened. And that is why today, after 45 years, we must recall what happened in those days only to remind ourselves of what can happen if ever we lose the core of our constitution and if we lose our democratic traditions.
Absolutely. Talking about these cases of brutality or these incidents of brutality, let's go into
Yeah.
some specific cases, Mr. Surya Prakash. Let's talk about the
Yeah.
Rajan case first.
Yes. You know, this Rajan case actually gives you it's a very good example of what can happen when things go wrong. You see, he was a student of the Regional Engineering College in Calicut, and he was living in the hostel there. And he was a left-wing activist. And of course, he and many other young people in those days, across the board, across ideologies, the youth were opposed to the emergency because of its assault on our democracy and constitution. And Rajan was one of them. So, somewhere someone said that he is responsible for an attack on a police station. They had heard that somebody called Rajan was there in the attack on a police station. So the police zeroed in on several Rajans. One of them was this. Someone said he is the fellow. And later it transpired that he was not involved in that incident. But whatever it is, his name was Rajan. So the police landed up one early morning, picked him up from the hostel. After that, nobody saw Rajan, except that there's a traveler's bungalow in a place called Kakkayam, near that hostel, some kilometers away, where people heard shrieks from that traveler's bungalow, because that is where they were torturing Rajan and asking for information. Finally, in the process of torture, they killed him, and the body was never found. The Rajan's father went on petitioning the High Court, petitioning Chief Minister, but there was no help because, as you are aware, the whole atmosphere and build-up was that we do not have the right to move courts. We do not have, so the habeas corpus petition cannot be moved and all these things. So anyway, consequence of this was that the father and the parents were in great distress and they could not trust their son. And it went on, and then, of course, many police officers were prosecuted, and many of them got away for want of evidence. But this is the most horrifying part of this story. 38 years after the incident, the driver of that police van, in which Rajan's body was transported from the traveler's bungalow, he spoke up, and he told a Malayalam newspaper what had happened. He said the body was taken to a meat production factory, and first it was put in the cold storage. After that, it was put in the grinder and ground to bits and later fed to pigs. This is his statement after 38 years, because people wanted to know what happened to Rajan. And this is what the police had done to Rajan. This is the most horrifying story. Of course, there was a case of Lawrence Fernandez, brother of George Fernandez, who was detained and tortured for 10 days continuously in 1976 by the Karnataka police. So there are any number of stories of this kind, absolute horror, which, in a police Raj, there is nobody to ask you anything. And this kind of recklessness could be seen in the conduct of many people who who were acting on the illegal, unconstitutional orders of the Indira Gandhi and the coterie around her.
You spoke about it and you touched upon it in the beginning of this interview, Mr. Surya Prakash, about how the judiciary was under attack. So tell us more about the 42nd Amendment and the frontal attack on the judiciary?
Yeah, what happened was, you see, in the Keshwananda Bharati case, the Supreme Court judgment said that Parliament has under Article 368 the power to amend the Constitution, but it should not disturb the basic features or basic structure of the Constitution. So Indira Gandhi, she had appointed a committee headed by Swaran Singh to suggest amendments to the Constitution. And the law minister, H.R. Gokhale, and many others were of the view that the Supreme Court has erred and we have the power to amend the Constitution. We can do anything we want with it. And so they brought in the 42nd Amendment to impose a lot of restrictions on high courts, Article 226 to curb the power of high courts under Article 226, to say that the high courts cannot look at the constitutionality of central laws and so on and so forth. Anyway, it was a general attack on the judiciary. During the debate, I must tell you, you will be shocked to know that there was a full-scale attack on the judiciary in Parliament by members of the Congress party. So, Swaran Singh, who was heading that committee, he said, we cannot shirk that responsibility. We should not at all be apologetic about changing the Constitution. But here is CM Stephen. Please hear what he says about the judiciary. He says after the 42nd Amendment, now the power of this Parliament is declared to be out of bounds for any court. It is left to the courts whether they should defy it. I do not know whether they will have the temerity to do that. But if they do, that will be a bad day for the judiciary. The Committee of the House is sitting with regard to the inquiry into the conduct of judges. We have got our methods, our machinery. Can you see this blatant threat? He says, will you have the temerity to challenge Parliament? We are a Committee of Parliament is looking into your conduct, and we have our methods and we will teach you a lesson. This is the language used for the Supreme Court of India in the Parliament by members of the Congress party. So, this is something which one should never forget if you don't want a repeat of any of these things in this country ever again. Then, in regard to the higher judiciary, see some of the things they have said. Swaran Singh says, unfortunately, the courts have transgressed the limits prescribed for them. It's a crude invasion. It's a crude sort of invasion. NKP Salve says, in the life of every nation, there comes a time when the Constitution has to be saved from the court and the court from itself. Priyaranjan Das Munshi says, until and unless we have the capacity to change the class character and concept of judicial wisdom of the country in regard to central laws and state laws, this will continue. So this was the kind of assault that was on in Parliament against the judiciary. And what happened to the media, we are all aware. So many laws were brought in. District magistrate was empowered to raid newspaper offices. So many other things happened. A lot of journalists were arrested and so on and so forth. The Prevention of Publication of Objection of Matters Act, Press Council Act was repealed. Press Council was abolished. So many things happened against every institution. So the net result was that in a few months into the emergency, all institutions were throttled. All institutions. So that was a complete breakdown of the whole constitutional scheme. Another thing that they did was they appointed censors everywhere, and it became very easy for the government to deal with the flow of information. They censored Parliament. That is, the censor would say what part of the debate. For example, I was quoting these things. At that time, censor may have said, no, you are not to quote CM Stephen. So, you are barred by the censor from quoting Parliament. What happens then? Secondly, Supreme Court, High Court judgment, Supreme Court judgment. The censor would say, this judgment of the High Court should not be published. This judgment of the Supreme Court should not be published. So this is the extent to which they had gone, and what the consequence of, as I said, the loss of democracy and democratic values. It can lead to anything.
Indeed, indeed. So, Mr. Surya Prakash, we've done several interviews up until this one, and I've always wanted to ask you this question. So, one last question before I let you go. On the day that the emergency was imposed, at what level was this decision taken? Did anyone else in the government or the cabinet know about what was happening?
Actually, that's a very nice question, because actually, barring one, no member of the cabinet knew that the Prime Minister is advising the President. She called Siddharth Shankar Ray, the Chief Minister of West Bengal, and said, tell me, country needs a shock treatment, what do I do? So he came back on 25th June to say, impose an emergency under Article 352. So she took him to tell the President that. Then she sent the letter to the President. At 10:30 p.m., the Home Minister was called and asked to sign something written on a plain sheet of paper, which was sent to the President. It was not even on the Home Minister, that is Brahmanand Reddy's letterhead. He was the only one who knew at 10:30 p.m. She called a cabinet meeting at 6 a.m. to inform the cabinet of what she has done. Then the law minister was unaware. He got to know there is an emergency when he went to the cabinet meeting at 6 a.m. Even more pathetic was the situation vis-a-vis the Home Secretary, S.L. Khurana. He got a call at 6 a.m. saying a cabinet meeting is on and come here. He just jumped out of his bed and landed up in the Prime Minister's house at 6:30 to find a cabinet meeting is on, emergency is imposed. He didn't know. The cabinet secretary, B.D. Pandey, he's the highest civil servant in the country, the cabinet secretary. Totally oblivious. At 4:30, they woke him up and said there is a cabinet meeting at 6 o'clock. Actually, it's the cabinet secretary who has to do the preparatory work for the meeting. He was told at 4:30 a.m., pulled out of bed. And best is Atma Jairam, the Intelligence Bureau Director. This great man realized that the country is under an emergency when he reached his office at 10 a.m. on 26th of June. This is the amount of secrecy, that shrouded the whole thing. And worse than that, I will tell you, that day, around 3 a.m. of 26th, Siddharth Shankar Ray was told by Om Mehta in the Prime Minister's house that they are planning to lock up all the high courts and cut off electricity to all the newspapers. He was horrified. He called Indira Gandhi. She had already retired after. They were actually working on her speech till about 3 a.m. Then he insisted that he wants to hear. Then he told her what is happening. Then she came back after some time and said, Siddhartha, no, the high courts will not be locked up. Meanwhile, Sanjay Gandhi came and scolded Siddharth Shankar Ray for interfering. And he said, you people do not know how to run the country. Because he was very particular that these actions be taken. So they had even planned to lock up all the high courts next morning.
Right.
So that is the terrible consequence of dictatorship. And that's why I say that this was a fascist regime. And that was our experience of fascism for 21 months in this country.
Absolutely. All right, Mr. Surya Prakash, a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you so much for joining me on Rajya Sabha TV and sharing your experiences and putting things into perspective for us. Always a pleasure to interview you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frank.